Marketing for the now, marketing for the now, marketing for the now, marketing for the now. 10 minutes, 12 remarkable guests for 2 hours answering a singular important question.
Are you ready, Gary?
What do you think?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Marketing for the Now 2.0. Gary, it sounds like you were ready before. Are you ready now to just dive right in?
I like how that video ended, because like literally when you asked me there and that was the video part, I literally sat here while taking care of a client issue on Andrea and said, I'm always ready. And then
you are always ready.
I am ready. And the lineup, kudos to you and the team. Today's a remarkable day. Hello, everybody. I know we're streaming these on all my channels, so let me say what's up to the Vayner Nation. Very, very fast paced the way I like it, off of something very specific. You can see this up here right now, the question of the day. Andrea, I don't know if there's anything else you want to do or get the intros going, but I know this is going to be massively rapid fired and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, you got that right. The only thing is we'd love for everybody to chime on in with any kinds of questions. So hashtag marketing for the now, and we're going to just jump right in. First up, we've got none other than Kevin O'Leary. He's not only the star of ABC's Shark Tank, he's an active photographer, a watch collector, guitarist, and author of 3 #1 best-selling books. Welcome, Kevin.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Kevin, it's a real pleasure to have you here. First of all, how have you done through this pandemic, both on a personal level and maybe a macro kind of like a business level? You know, because this pandemic has created a lot of, winners and a lot of losers. It's been very all over the place. You have a vast portfolio. How are you? And then how is your business world?
Well, Gary, that is the question for everybody in America today. And you're right, there are winners and losers. But, personally, I'm adjusting just like you are to living a world in a digital way. Just every day I communicate as we are right now. And all of my companies, I have over 50 portfolio companies now, have gone through this incredible transition to what I call the digital pivot, America 2.0. The ones that have survived, first of all, we've gone through this 7 months now, have been able to tell a story online, shift to direct-to-consumer sales, become very proficient at logistics, and have been able to just take away what they lost from retail sales and sold it direct to customers. So in this crazy outcome that I could have never foreseen, 80% of the portfolio, even though revenues are down, are actually ahead of free cash flow forecasts. Why? Because they've gone from just doing 10% direct to consumer to doing 40 to 50% direct to consumer at almost 100% gross margin, and they've saved their companies. Now, the ones in travel, the ones in entertainment, the movie theater businesses, the wedding
live
industry,
events.
The live event stuff, I'm sorry, they're going to zero. And that's 20% of my portfolio. But 80%, that's fantastic. They're going to make it.
So let's frame up the question that this whole show is going to be about, and we have an incredible lineup starting with you. Where is the customer's attention? How do you synthesize that question, and what is the answer?
Well, never in our lives, Gary, have we had the opportunity to have such a captive customer. They are sitting at home just like you and I are. They are looking to be entertained, communicated with. They are willing and able to purchase products and services, but they want it done conveniently and delivered directly to them. They are not going to go get it anymore. This is the digitization of America in a very fast way. And what I've learned, and this is really binary, I used to have this joke, Gary. I used to tell people, well, what career should you have? And I'd say, well, there's 3 careers if you're going to go to college and invest in yourself: engineering, engineering, and engineering. But now, you know who I'm hiring? Story writers, videographers, photographers, editors. I'm having to compete all around the world. I'm hiring some people in Israel and Italy and France to cut video because all of my companies are telling stories on their websites. And so we have now empowered a whole new generation of artists who are doing phenomenally well that I would have never guessed. Storytelling, direct communications with your customer, compelling them to watch that 19, 20, 39, 49-second video that communicates what your product or service is what the successful companies are doing. And we are spending millions of dollars doing this digital pivot.
Obviously, because of Dragon's Den and then Shark Tank, you have a personal brand. How have you, the human, because you're talking, it's obviously, as you can imagine, I'm listening to the first 5 minutes of this conversation. I've been spending the last 11 years building a communications Death Star to do everything you just talked about, because I basically believed that the internet was going to squeeze the middle. Everything was going to be direct to consumer, whether that's OTT or e-commerce, and that the ability to storytell and run the arbitrage of the distributions was actually the game. So I like those chess moves of how they played out to me. I'm curious, because I'm sure a lot of people who are watching are curious right now. What about you yourself within social media? Have you, in these 9 months, because I'm sure you've been busy helping, mentoring, I'm sure you're constantly on calls with entrepreneurs, these 50 plus businesses, but what about you and your own personal brand? Have you picked up a platform? Have you started to use LinkedIn from a content standpoint? Have you downloaded TikTok? Where you the man, you the shark, you the wonderful, where do you sit personally right now with social or content creation, whether first party, because you grab the phone and do it, or whether you live a little bit of the game I play? I have D-Rock, ironically, is here for the first time in 7 months, have somebody producing for you. You, the personal brand, what's the production around that, if anything?
Gary, you are the role model for guys like me. You got it right, you guessed it right. The middle did get squeezed out, there's no question. And I really got involved in social about 2.5 years ago, and I hired a team of producers, editors, and storytellers to work within my own production company, O'Leary Productions. And what I learned, and this is the paramount, maybe I'll give you credit for this, because certainly watching you cannot bullshit people. You can't lie to them. You have to be totally transparent, whether that's good, bad, or ugly. You gotta tell the truth. That is what a personal brand is built on.
Yeah.
The minute, it's almost like the analogy I use, I teach this stuff now. I'm here in Boston. I used to do lectures in person, but now I do them virtually at Harvard and MIT and Temple and Notre Dame. And I talk about this stuff primarily to graduating cohorts of business students and engineers about entrepreneurship. It's like dating. When you fall in love and you meet somebody and you're just empowered by that magic moment. And I draw this analogy all the time. It's so wonderful, and everybody should fall in love with whoever it's going to be. But then as time passes, things change. And maybe a year or two later, you're thinking about cheating, okay? And you do. Now, you have a decision to make after you've done that. Do you tell the truth to your significant other, or do you keep it a secret? And here's why I bring it up for business. You're going to get caught. 100% of the time when you cheat, you're going to get caught. Because you didn't tell the truth, your significant other can never look at you the same again. You've lost 50% of the equity in that relationship forever. It may not break up. You may go on, but it will never be the same.
Yeah.
And in business, the first time you lie to your customers, your constituencies, your shareholders, you lose 50% of the equity forever. Better to tell the truth and take the hit.
And the ownership and transparency and intent around the I'm sorry. That's absolutely right, everything out of your mouth, comma, there's also the half pregnant sorry, and there's the real sorry. And I think corporations, the standards in which people want from companies is completely impossible for most companies. They may be good at the environment, but they're bad at wages. They may be companies are a convoluted animal, just like people. And this thought that you don't understand how to say sorry when you're trying to fix something, people would rather dance, look over there, a bird, instead of owning it. And to your point, in that lack of apology creates more damage sometimes than even the event itself.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly it. And I tell all my CEOs now, look, do not lie to the customers. Don't lie to your employees. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to anybody, your shareholders even. Take the pain, take the hit. Admit the mistake you made, and you will build a relationship, particularly with customers. What we're learning online is if you have a direct relationship with a customer and you're honest with them and you tell them, hey, the product's going to be delayed, or sorry, you got a bad product, we'll replace it, we'll give you your money back, whatever it is, that communication ends up being very, very valuable over time. Those customers stay loyal. We've learned that 100-fold in our companies now. And now we're across the portfolio, we're now at 48% direct of revenue to customer. That's magic, Gary. That's friggin' magic. Because that's 100% gross margin business.
one of the, we've run out of time. We're going to move on. We really appreciate your time. But one of the fun topics in the chess game of what you're talking about is channel conflict for the people that still rely on a lot of business from retail, as retail's watching them go around them. And that is going to be interesting battles of the next decade in business.
Let's talk about that next time, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Andrea.
Thanks, Kevin. Next up, we've got Jim Stengel. Jim was previously the beloved global CMO of P&G. He's now an industry icon, CEO of his own company, host of the CMO podcast, author and speaker, and friend. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Andrea. Good to see you. Hi, Gary.
Hey, Jim, how are you? So for a minute, because you're not on a global television show where I think everybody knows, even though in our circles in Madison Avenue, advertising land, you are an absolute legend and a statue, but knowing there's so many different people here, why don't you give a little context on your career as a marketer and obviously the kind of iconic role you had and a little bit about this. So I'll give you 2 minutes to give a little context because I want the audience to know who you are.
Sure, Gary. Hey, man, I'm one of 6 kids, grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, small city, grew up in the city with a bunch of friends, played outside a lot, was an entrepreneur early on, doing whatever I could. You'll love this, Gary. I had a tie rental business when I was in parochial school.
I like that.
So I knocked on old guys' doors, asked if they had some of the old fat ties from the 40s. I rented them for $10 a day to my students. We started this movement of fat ties. The Monsignor busted me, called me a racketeer, and I was suspended and sent home. So it's all been uphill from there.
I mean, to me, when I hear that, it's so funny. I mean, we're in a slightly different age bracket, but even for me, when I was growing up, entrepreneurship was completely demonized. School is the only way. There was none of this. And when I hear the fat tie thing, knowing the Ralph Lauren story, I think you were a creative pioneer, my friend. Well,
I hope so. Anyway, I went from there to journalism, went to work at Time Inc., first job out of college, saw that the real action was on the business side. I went to business school, full ride, Penn State, from there to P&G. P&G, 25 years, all over the world, last 7 as chief marketing officer. Fell in love with this concept of brand purpose, having brands aspire to do more than provide a functional benefit to somehow change the world, make an impact that's natural for their history and their category. Left the company to start my own firm, all about purpose. I wanted to write about it, teach about it, help others do it. Been doing that for 12 years, investing in companies that are purpose-driven. And now I'm trying to crack this last area of brand purpose, which is how the hell do we measure it and find the causality with business results? And we're making great progress on that. There you are.
Jim,
I'm married, 2 great kids, love my wife.
I love that. You're a great dude and an inspiration for so many in the waters that I swim these days, which is the marketing landscape. Jim, where is the customer's attention, and how has that shifted in your perspective, knowing that P&G is the iconic television marketer of that generation? Where is the attention? When I ask that question, how do you frame that up, and what is your answer?
Consumers are looking to leaders and companies to make a difference. Right? Whatever data you look at, trust in government is down, way down, not just in our country, but in all countries. Trust in business and marketing is up. So it's our time. And there isn't one marketing leader right now in one company that isn't trying to embrace social action, social justice, responsibility, making a difference in people's lives, being of service.
Let me ask you a tough question. What percentage of these companies that are trying to do good do you feel are completely full of shit and are just trying to check the box of the moment? And how many of them, by percentage, your gut, and how many of them are actually living it?
It's 80-20 living it.
Now, let me ask you a tougher question because I have some context in this. I like that answer, but I'm going to ask you a tougher question. There are CMOs that you interact with and CEOs and board members as humans that I think are giving you the answer of such a beautiful answer of 80-20, which is a remarkable answer. How many, when I think of your answer, it makes sense to me because I think that's, when I think about all the CMOs and CEOs that you and I know as human beings, that it's 8 out of 10. But a lot of those human beings are looking for their companies to be the activists on their behalf. That's what they feel.
Yeah.
how many of those companies are actually going to be able to act once that person actually tries to get the operation to do it in a world of publicly traded board members, other constituents, and competing agendas? How does that manifest in real life against the intent of those small?
Yeah, Gary, it's a journey, but I can tell you the consumer is seeing a change. And, we used to say at P&G, they still say the consumer is the boss, and the consumer is expecting companies, brands, leaders to stand for something, to have a voice, and to do it in action.
Jim, why if the consumer is the voice? Actually, I'm sorry, Andrea, I'm going off script because I've got the guy in front of me. Why in a world where somebody like P&G, for example, and others says the consumer's is boss, why are all the reports, internal MMMs, Nielsen's, Millward Brown, the entire currency, awards, Cannes, the articles, adage, why is everything in Madison Avenue, Fortune 500 land that reports actually have very dirty data to the reality of the consumer? Why is there such a big ecosystem of fake reporting in marketing land? How did that happen? Because I sit in meetings constantly where the brand lift studies and everything's remarkable. You know this. This is what I came into. And I'm like, what is this bizarro world? Impressions and PR, but it got a Cannes Lion, but the business is down. Nothing about corporate America, Fortune 500 marketing, CPG life has been about the actual customer, even though everyone says it. All the currency is non-consumer centric.
Yeah, Gary, it's, the great companies have empathy. They stay close to people. They get out with their teams. They're in the field. People will see through all this bullshit. It's about action. And the research industry has been backward looking and not looking at behavior, not looking at causality with actions and results. And that's where we need to move the research field. That's what I'm working on. We've invested in a startup who has a really promising methodology to look at purpose activation and business results, the causality. So we're looking at the action and not what people are saying.
Do you think Fortune 500 brands, since that is such a strength of yours, are contemporary consumer-centric communicators where the attention is? Do you think the Coca-Colas, the Procters, the Krafts, the BMWs, the Mercedes, I can go on and on and on, Starbucks, are they great at knowing where the customer's attention is? And are they great at putting creative in front of them? Or did they lose their way once it went away from a traditional television structure?
I think they, many of them foundered, lost their way, all the stuff that they were trained in and were good at kind of became irrelevant. But I can tell you a silver lining to this crisis, Gary, is people are renewing and rebooting. The podcast that I do with you and your team, I've been talking to leaders twice a week, different leaders of the great brands of the world. What the hell's going on? How are you changing? How are your teams changing? People are going through a massive renewal and reboot. And the words I'm hearing are focus, passion, empathy, humanity, agility, more communication, social action. That's massively positive. And they're not just, this is real.
I love it.
Real. This is not a veneer. This is real. They're saying it with great resolve and great action and great commitments, by and large.
Outside of the altruism and the positioning, and I love this, just curious because I know the kind of audience we have. There's a lot of conversation in startup land and entrepreneur land of like, hey, Gary, stop teaching the big companies how to spend money on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram because the costs are going up.
Yeah.
Your personal, do you believe the creative industry respects the creative that goes in those channels? Or do you think that it's still above the line, below the line, that most brands don't understand that brand is being built here? They still kind of look at it as like, DR down there, but brand is done over here. Like, do you see cracks in that foundation? Or do you still think like, paying $2 million for a production for a TVC still feels right for my Rice-A-Roni brand or my Michelin tires? Or are you starting to see that people understand the real crack? Like where's your pulse on that?
Yeah, the cracks are in the foundation. People are starting to move. There's this whole movement. I hate to use another buzzword, but people are looking at the experience of their brand with people. And when you're starting to think about, okay, how do people experience my brand? And you start looking at that, thinking about that, measuring that, that's not a TV ad. Right? That's not a campaign. That's what's happening to the brand and the person daily on an interaction. Or is it frictionless? Is it happy? Is it delightful? Do they exceed expectations? So this whole movement toward looking at experience is a positive thing. So there are cracks in the foundation of above and below the line, but it's a massive icon, right?
All the kids that want to get into advertising, in the last second I got you here, what should be their modern thought of approaching that?
Be creative, be consumer-centric, be bold, stand out, don't be afraid. We need those ideas.
Art school or post content on social media or a cold email Jim Stengel? Like, what are some of the hacks?
I would look for non-traditional, right? Art school, design school, just people who are ideas-based and do look for ideas to solve problems. That's what a great agency's always done. It's what you guys do.
Jim, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for these 10 minutes.
Gary, take care. Good to be with you.
Thanks, Jim. Our next guest is Charlamagne the God, author, radio, and TV personality. He's the outspoken co-host of The Breakfast Club, a national radio show, leader of iHeart's Black Effect Podcast Network, and just inked a deal with Audible. Welcome, Char.
Yo, Gary V, what's up, my brother?
What's up, fam? Listen, there are very few people that I feel innovate and do shit as much as I do. Your last 9 months, I feel like every time I open my phone, you're announcing some new biz dev, some new production, some new initiative. You know, your capacity to create opportunities in the last year have been remarkable. You know, I've been quietly sending you messages because I'm impressed, because it's rare to see. I live it. I mean, it feels like you have a new thing every 60 days. Kudos on that. And that leads me to the question, is that you reacting to where you see the consumer attention is these days? Forget about what you fill it with, whether it's selfish, selfless. You have a lot of thoughts going through your mind, a lot of agendas, a lot of things you want to see both for yourself and the world. But before we even get into those things, are you in a place, like, you're watching you move right now as a personal brand? I feel like you're reacting to the understanding of the different shifts of where people consume. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about that, Gary? Like, a lot of the things that people are seeing me announce now, like, those seeds were planted 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. It's just that, I guess now with God's divine timing, you know, these things are happening now. So it seems like it's a reaction, but I saw this 2 years ago. I saw where the audio business was going. I saw where the podcast network business was going. And I always was thinking, okay, once we establish a podcast network, which I was already doing with Loudspeaker, because I was a part owner of Loudspeaker, but I wanted to do my own entity. But once we did that, I was thinking to myself, okay, what's the next level of audio? The next level of audio to me was scripted audio. Because people are riding in their cars, and the same way they listen to us have conversations, man, why can't we do sitcoms? Why can't we do documentaries? Why can't we do films? And then I started seeing, like, you know,
and Charlamagne, you know what's crazy about that? Mm-hmm. Technology brings us to the past. Some of the shows that were the biggest hits on TV started as radio shows. People sat around the radio and listened.
War of the Worlds by Orson Welles. I always said that. I'm like, yo, and I said that with social media. I said it's only a matter of time before some Orson Welles War of the World stuff happens because of social media. And I was like, yo, why don't I just create the next Orson Welles War of the Worlds type stuff?
And by the way, Gimlet showed it, right? You know, if you think about podcasts 2 years ago, there were people, whether it was a murder this or murder that, like, people started listening to the soap operas and the interviews and the things of that nature. CTG, explain to me your own behavior as a human. Have you adopted TikTok during this time because attention went there? Are you using Instagram more? Do you watch more lives? Do you listen to more podcasts? Is it more YouTube? Did you add to Netflix and now you have Disney Plus and HBO Max? Like, you, the human, your consumption, your attention, what has gotten more of your attention over the last 9 months?
I mean, definitely content has gotten more of my attention, but I can't react to what everybody is doing. Like, I'm not. And I see the hype about TikTok, but I'm not a TikTok person, so I don't even go on TikTok. I might see something if somebody sends it to me.
Can I ask you a real question? Because it's important, because I know how thoughtful you are, and you know we've jammed on this for years. Do you think there's any part of you that doesn't go on TikTok as, like, the move to just not go on TikTok for the sake of not going on TikTok? Do you think there's any percentage of your personality that does that? Or do you actually just not think the attention is worthwhile there?
Yeah, it's just not, it's not worth my attention. You know what I'm saying? Like, we only have but so much bandwidth for everything. You know, do you create for it though, knowing that, I mean, to me,
there are less than 500 people on earth that I would think of more that can get more value out of TikTok than you, the human, given the cross section of culture and music. It's one thing for you to be in feed for an hour watching stuff. Are you creating for it? And if you're not, why?
I'm creating for it unintentionally because people send me stuff all the time with them dubbing my voice or, you know, dubbing an interview from the Breakfast Club. So whether I'm doing it intentionally or not, I'm creating content for it. But me personally, I don't want to be on it.
Why? Because I think when I look at what you're doing on Instagram and I think through what you could be doing on TikTok right now, I think the things you're passionate about, whether it's racism in America, whether it's awareness to the stuff you're doing, whether it's just silly jokes, whether it's food, whatever the hell you care about, your opportunity given the attention graph on TikTok is greater on TikTok than on Instagram, though you're spending your time on Instagram.
Maybe I need to talk to you about it. I just don't see the equity in it for me now, to be honest with
well,
you.
Let me say, I'm not going to take more time here. I'll text you after this. The equity is there's more fucking attention on it than there is on Instagram.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Talk to me real quick, just for my own fun, the attention, because I know you also play in this world and you'll be the only one that can really deliver during this seminar on that. Where's the attention of the music lover today? Whether platform, whether artist, CTG's hot take on the attention of the music lover right now, platform or person or anything I'm not thinking of.
I would say it's the streaming services, but I think it's YouTube. You know, when you look at like NBA YoungBoy and Little Baby and all of those guys like that, like their YouTube numbers are crazy. And I think
crazy.
These kids, they like the visual that goes along with the music. I'm not saying that they're not streaming music, because of course they are, but I think when you can go on YouTube and actually see a very creative video by the baby, or see what, you know, Little Baby or NBA YoungBoy is wearing, or who they're hanging around, what car they're driving, that just makes the experience even bigger. That's why I like when I go on Tidal, I love the fact that Tidal has, you know, the video component to it, you know? And that's usually what I do. Like I still watch videos like I did back in the day, you know, only because I know that I can go check them out on YouTube or check them out on Tidal. It was a period of my life where I wasn't watching no music videos because it didn't seem like there was a place to consume them. But now,
they basically went away, and now we're kind of back to the heyday of MTV.
Because people are taking their visuals serious. Like I gotta give the baby a lot of credit for that. You know what I mean? Like the baby really started taking his visuals seriously, and I think a lot of people started following suit.
What about in podcast land? You know, what is the attention graph there, whether platform wise or show wise? Anything catching your attention there?
Yeah, man, it's so much. You know, I mean, shameless plug. Like I have a lot of podcasts on my network, The Black Effect, from a lot of talent that, you know, I partnered with, who's really amazing. Like somebody like Ebony K. Williams, she has a podcast called Holding Court, where she's just breaking down legal cases. And I think that's just something that's very, very
education.
It's education.
It's how a lot of us learned that weren't great at school. We're learning on the internet, and something like that show, which I'm aware, somebody literally hit me up about of like, I've literally learning law through this.
Yeah. And that's what she's there for. Somebody like Teslin Figaro, you know, she's a political pundit, but she just breaks down politics from a real street level, cause you know, she's from LA, so she hung out with a lot of the gang members and things like that. So she really understands what's happening on the concrete, but she also understands what's happening in, you know, on Capitol Hill. And so it's just like those podcasts I'm learning so much from. And even though they're on the Black Effect Podcast Network, the reason I wanted to partner with talent like that is because they have those kind of voices. And
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You wanted to learn from them. You're scratching your own itch. Thus, you're trying to get them on your platform.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, it's like people like, you know, Joe Rogan. I still love Joe Rogan. You know, I think, you know, you get so much out of him. You know, I mean, I'm a podcast junkie. Like, I listen to so much podcast a week, man. It's ridiculous.
When do you listen to podcasts? Working out, traveling, like you sit like in the middle of the day, 4 to 5 p.m. Like, is it in the background at all times? How do you actually consume it?
Both, because, you know, I'm commuting. So, you know, on the way to work, it's a 40-minute commute in the morning. So I'm listening to a podcast. On the way back, it could be up to an hour and a half, just trying to get out of New York. You know, when I'm working out, that's another, you know, hour and a half that I'm spending, you know, just vibing. So like I'm literally listening to podcasts all the time. Like every day I'm listening to a new podcast.
Charlamagne, I wish you nothing but health. I'll hit you up about TikTok and I'll see you soon.
Gary B, thank you, brother.
You got it, bro. Stay well.
Next, we welcome Jia Hyun, VP, Head of North America, Marketing Solutions for LinkedIn. Known as a marketing vet that drives growth, Jia has worked at LinkedIn, GE Capital, Citigroup, American Express, and Mastercard. She's also an enthusiastic amateur pickle artisan and loves dancing. Welcome, Jia.
Gia, if I had more time than 10 minutes, I'd be talking only about pickling because I find that amazing. First of all, how are you? And when you were posed with the question, where is the consumer's attention right now? How do you consume that and how do you articulate it? Thank you for being here.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me, and we can definitely do a full episode just on the art of fermentation. It's a must right now.
I think you and I are destined to do a wine and pickle pairing show.
I would love that. Yes. I'm doing well. We are doing well. The business is actually doing really well. The platform is explosive in terms of both the volume of conversation that's happening on LinkedIn, but also the types and the breadth of conversations happening on LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean, it has been changing for years now. I've been at LinkedIn for 5 years, and when I first joined, there was a common understanding, or I would call misunderstanding, about LinkedIn, that it's just a job site, or it's just a professional networking site, or it was just a place for people to do B2B marketing in a very, very niche way. And certainly jobs is an important part of the conversations that are happening on LinkedIn right now. There are a lot of people looking for jobs. There are a lot of companies that are looking to hire. There are a lot of people looking to upskill and really improve the trajectory of their careers during this time. And so that's still a really important part of what the conversation, the dialogues that are happening on LinkedIn are. And, there are 700 million plus members on LinkedIn that are leaning into that particular part of the experience. And if you check out hashtag offering help, hashtag open to work, I encourage you to lean in and give and get help in that capacity. But that's just the very sort of obvious tip of the whole iceberg, because, when we talk about where the attention is going, we've known for a while internally at LinkedIn that every professional is a consumer. Every professional is a person who has their personal circumstances, and LinkedIn has always been a place where conversations between businesses and professionals happen every day. And some of it's about business solutions. Of course, it's about jobs, but it's about personal development. It's about what I need in my life to be successful tomorrow, today, what I need in my life that are solutions that are going to make my life more productive and easier. And,
I apologize for interrupting, because I'm just thinking about the constituents that are watching the show and how to extract value. Let me ask you a couple of questions, because I'm not sure if this is on your radar, but I've been screaming about LinkedIn's value for the last 3 years, from an organic nature and really from a media targeting nature. If you're in the B2B space, would people be shocked if they sell soap, if they sell workout, programs, if they sell hoodies, if they, do you think, I want to dig back into that because I want to bring value. Is it conversation within LinkedIn? I mean, I don't want to say it this way, but it's almost to me the Facebookification of LinkedIn, which is the broadness. Even when you were saying it, I kind of made this gesture. I am just blown away by how much wine, LinkedIn started as a utility. It was job life. Yeah. It is now a full-blown content ecosystem. And yes, you must factor in the psychology of a LinkedIn user when they're in a LinkedIn feed, which will be different than that same person being on TikTok. But the breadth of what you can do on the platform, for me today feels, I look at it the same way I look at Facebook or Twitter. Is that accurate? So are you seeing that? Is that being talked about?
Absolutely, 100% agree with you. But I will challenge you a little bit in terms of this sort of dividing line between what's B2C and B2B is not the way we're necessarily looking at it, because it's really about business to professional, right? Yeah. In an advertising sense, right?
But so when you talk about, for example, I apologize, when you can target by job title in a way that you can't anywhere else. My ability, if I'm selling a SaaS product, to target by people who hold the title as Chief Innovation Officer, right? And then create content for that, creates a unbelievable framework for B2B marketing that is different than I can do on Facebook or TikTok. So I can go broad on LinkedIn on consumer, but you have a substantial advantage in B2B marketing over the competitive landscape because of your targeting capabilities.
Yeah. I mean, the targeting, absolutely. The context, absolutely. The mindset that people bring to the platform, absolutely.
Well, those are big things.
Those are big things. And if you think about the conversations that used to happen that were sort of the provenance of boardrooms and the provenance of conference rooms that everyone thought was very different and distinct from conversations that happened at the water cooler or the cafeteria or in the hallways or during the commute, especially in the past year, those walls came down because literally all of those conversations are happening with the same people in one room in most instances. It's your kitchen table, it's your office, it's your bedroom.
I'm in my apartment right now doing business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real quick, I apologize. Khalifa Y, who says, yeah, but the CPCs are too high. The reality is that's a creative game. The reason so many people struggle on LinkedIn or any other platform for that matter on their CPCs, because the CPAs are higher, the CPMs are higher when you get better targeting, is the creative more so than the targeting. Gia, do you think people have really struggled in a world where data and information have advanced in understanding that creative's still the variable? Like I can get in front of that CFO on LinkedIn, but if my picture, video, and information isn't good, nobody's buying anything. There's a trillion Gary V wannabes out there. The variable of the creative is the important part. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin touched upon this. Jim talked about it a little bit in terms of there's sort of shortcuts that we take in terms of measurement that are supposed to be proxies for something, but CPC is not a proxy for quality. CPC is not a proxy for the stickiness of the engagement or the value or the resonance of the message that you've landed with the consumer. And so I challenge the notion that, I think that on CPC alone, you're not going to know that you're creating resonance. You're not going to know that you're making an impact on that consumer.
I think that's right.
It's always quality over quantity. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Gia, one more time.
It's going to be quality over quantity. Quantity is going to be important, and who doesn't love scale? But what scale without impact?
Gia, what about your own personal attention behaviors? Have you expanded your OTT lineup at home? Maybe there's some good pickling somewhere.
While the fermentation is happening in the basement, I'm probably oversubscribed on the streaming side. And then I think where I'm active is LinkedIn, where I'm active is Instagram. And then I've got my TikTok feed going in my peripheral vision, because I got to watch my kids. And then Twitter, I'm passively and actively consuming. So that's kind of all happening in tandem. But, I think the thing that, just going back to, as these walls are coming down in terms of what is appropriate or what was really uniquely suited to this particular environment versus the other, because we're seeing this incredible convergence happening on our platform, we're super excited about launching Stories, where Stories is not a new format. It's a format that everyone's familiar with in other platforms, but this idea that we kind of all miss those moments in the office, if you will, where you said, hey, check this out. Look what's happening right now. Look what I'm doing right now. Look what I just learned. That kind of thing that we're able to do on LinkedIn through the Stories format is really exciting, particularly in this particular point in time. And then, live and events. I mean, we're doing this live streaming on LinkedIn right now. It's an incredibly exciting development because here again, we're bringing down the walls. I mean, there was a time where participating in a conversation like this and having a front row seat to a conversation like this required you to travel, required you to find room capacity, and there was so much logistics involved, and some events were just not accessible to everybody. So having live as a feature on the platform, and then the ability to bring a bunch of events functionality around that, where we can get individuals and businesses the ability to bring people in, invite them, showcase the content live, and then and then give them the ability to actually have pull through on that after the live event. That's something that I think is very relevant and so important to, making this conversation accessible to everybody.
Gia, I really appreciate your time. Continued success. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gia. Next up, Kavita Gupta, co-founder of FinTech TV and Delta Growth Fund. She's at Stanford University, where she teaches beyond Bitcoin and ethics for AI after leading a VC hedge fund investing in blockchain technology. And Kavita received the UN Social Finance Innovator Award for her work on the Green Bond team at the World Bank. Welcome, Kavita.
Thank you.
Kavita, how are you?
Good. Was that a very nerdy introduction to start with?
Listen, like I always say, whether it's a good or bad introduction or nerdy or funny or silly, even getting an introduction is pretty nice, isn't it?
True, absolutely. How are you doing today?
I'm well. I think the concept of the show, where is the consumer's attention? I'd love to get your perspective and thoughtful mind on that. When you hear that, where does your mind go and where do you take that conversation?
For me, my mind goes on privacy. Like we are talking, today is the time when everybody's talking about data privacy, what's happening to our data, where are we going with, whether it's the ads, whether it's using anything on internet. And it could be in financial sector, it could be related to my credit card, it could be related to my presence or like whatever I go on my search. And it is so funny, every time I have this conversation, even when I teach and I ask students, we have all the problems, but when you think of one product or one company which is providing you a solution across those streams, which one do you think of? I do sometimes hear Apple here and there, but nothing on financial space, nothing in other search space. People are like, yeah, these are our issues. We don't have a solution. That's where we're living right now.
What do you think what do you think most people think, when you think about privacy as an attention conversation, I am blown away by people's inability to describe what they're upset about, right? I mean, I think this is very important, right? I mean, like when I go into very thoughtful, I understand why it's a conversation for the intellect. I understand why it's happening at universities and media companies, and I understand the conversation. I'm fascinated by the collective human beings' inability to say what's upsetting them, because they'll speak to, well, I don't like the algorithm controlling me. And when you ask them a second question, they're unable to continue the conversation. What is your perspective on that?
I think it's very individual right now because we don't have regulations or we don't have a common platform for people to come together and say this is 16 points or these are 15 points. If you go to Africa, most of the people are like, can we even say whatever we want to say on Twitter or Facebook and not go to jail? For them, privacy just fall down upon that, right? When you come to US and people like, again, you said it very clearly, like there is a classes and classic and like class and a mass, right? So when you go into the class society, you are talking about very intellectual things. Oh, I want my financial details. Nobody should have my driving license number. Why do they need my height and my age and all this stuff on my DL and then take photocopies every time I check in the hotel? Versus if you go to a teenager going to college, they would be more interested about, hey, if I have to delete something on my Twitter, Facebook, or anywhere on my social media from my young days to when I'm getting a job, where is my privacy between this and what can a person hiring me can see and cannot see? So it really depends. It's a very individual approach from going to jail all the way to my drunken pictures when I was 15-year-old. So there is no common platform for it so far.
And do you think there should be?
I think there should be, because a financial privacy is very different than an identity privacy versus your social versus private life privacy. The new generation, which is like my nieces and like my very young nieces who are coming in it, they don't understand whatever they are posting, what is going to be the repercussion of those things and how it can be used or abused against them, because right now we are all just figuring it out. And by the time we figure out, it may or may not be late,
And give me a worst case scenario of used and abused against someone from the way that you filter the conversation.
Lot of times, like, I mean, look at our politicians, right? The younger and like, look at AOC, like, you know, there was like literally was posted her dance moves from her college days. And you're still talking about this generation. I mean, the way she handled it was really, really great. Kudos to her. But it was used against, oh, she is not responsible enough to take care of you with all her belief systems and everything, even after 10 years or 12 years.
But how is that different than when people showed a picture of Gary Hart with his potential mistress in the Inquirer in 1988, or the, you know, the way that Richard Nixon, you know, with all the things he had to go through? Like, what is the difference in that scenario? Because I understand the information, but, you know, Joe Biden making a quote, or Donald Trump not sharing his taxes, like you're talking about the distribution mechanism, but that behavior around people has always existed, no?
So there was much more difficult for having a proof with respect to footage, video. You have to have investigative journalists. You have to find your target. You have to go behind them. They have to be at certain level. Whatever happened at Watergate, you have a sitting president and you went against it. Or in case of Clinton or something, you had the whole commission going. Now, all you have to do is to hire somebody and just scrub your Google history.
But wouldn't that speak to a more transparent world? Because in the past, it was subjective and people with high wealth were able to make deals with the people that own the media companies, and thus so much never came out. One could argue that this becomes far more transparent. The world that you're describing led to people that had political clout with Walter Mondale or with Rupert Murdoch, and they were actually able to suppress information at a much higher level. And then it was just selective exposure versus the framework we're in now.
I think those are two. There's a decentralization part, which should absolutely be there for transparency. But then there is a part where you choose, where you are aware about what you put out by yourself is your own responsibility. How many youngsters know whatever they're putting out on Instagram, on Snapchat is completely just out there and about for the rest of their existence or even after that. I think that thought process, that knowledge, that education is the part missing. Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I'm sorry. The question there, though, is doesn't society then move along with it, right? You know, I'd love to understand this notion that you taking a photo with, you know, doing beer pong or all these things that these children don't know what they're doing. I'm asking individuals to give me the actual story of ramifications. This notion that your nieces are out of control and then they have actual real life ramifications has been the toughest part of this conversation, in my opinion. You know, people speak about it theoretically, but then society's norms move along with it because underneath the empathy and hypocrisy frameworks that are built around more exposure follow along suit. You know, please.
I agree with you. And I think it is a combination of that awareness, plus it's a combination of having rules that, you know, certain things cannot be used for your professional unless it's directly related to it. If you have abused a woman or a man or an individual growing up, then any proof, social media or not social media, should be used. But if it is about you in your individual space at your friend's house was drinking legally, that should not be used for banning you not to do a particular job. You know, so I think
but I don't think it is. I don't think anybody who drank underage has been eliminated from politics. As a matter of fact, I would argue that what this world has allowed is everyone's actually in play for politics, because what happens is the reverse. And then the other bigger question comes in the way that you're framing it up. Where is the responsibility of self-responsibility or parenting? We have an entire generation of parents who want to blame technology for their shortcomings of creating a framework for their children.
That could be interesting, and absolutely not my deep understanding, or like I'm not an expert of it. But I do believe that's a very interesting topic, and in technology we should go. So like on our platform at fintech.tv, we do like deep thought leadership, 30 minutes, 20 minutes interviews across blockchain, impact stories and everything, and how technology impact is coming out on next generation, whether it is in a positive way, which is environment sustainability or blockchain or something, versus the negative way. I think those conversations would be very important. You just gave me an idea to do a new series about it.
Well, I'm glad. Any final thoughts? And since I see I have one more minute, anything we didn't get to touch on? Because I know these go fast, and I really appreciate your time.
No, yeah, it's great. I think my final thoughts would be, I think I would say all the marketers out there who are working with amazing products, that your billion citizens whom you want to put next is actually outside US, outside Europe. Look into the international market, look into the technologies of blockchain, which provides you transparency, cryptocurrencies, which are providing you the same day settlements for an amazing business to go in $1 trillion market outside the country, is what have always worked in and where I feel is the space. And when we are doing all these stuff on fintech.tv, we realize that regulations and everything which we are building up in US are actually much more apt to everything what we are doing in emerging markets who are way ahead of us in what's happening in US. So my last thought would be just go and check out the emerging markets.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. Andrea?
Thanks, Kavita. Next up, we have Rajamannar, the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer and President of Healthcare for Mastercard. Raja is an accomplished global business executive with more than 25 years of experience, including a long list of industry awards, including Global Marketer of the Year and Most Tech-Savvy CMO. And coming soon, you must read his first book, Quantum Marketing. Welcome, Raja.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Really appreciate it.
Raja, very important question right off the bat. First of all, it's great to see you and I hope you're well. Did you actually read all those books behind you?
Yes, I did.
I'm impressed. I had a feeling. 50
books every year, absolutely read.
Good for you. Is that the majority of your consumption? If you're doing 50 books a year, obviously either you're a very prolific reader or have the skill set of reading comprehension, or do books actually take a high percentage of your consumption behavior versus, let's say, the phone or the television or audio and podcast?
It's the last.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I'm one of those traditional readers who like to read physical books, and that's where I spend a lot of my time on.
Good for you. What's the last, actually just for fun and bring value, what's the last great book that really caught your attention recently?
It was the revision of the book by Sean Eckhart, The Happiness Advantage.
Very cool. And what's the macro thesis there for anybody who's interested?
It's very philosophical in one sense and highly pragmatic at another. The whole premise is normally people will work hard to accomplish success. And once they get success, they buy a whole bunch of things for themselves, and then they're all happy. The reality is just the opposite. When you're in a happy state of frame, you work much better and you achieve more success. And it's a beautiful reframing and something which might be blindingly obvious to some, but not to many. So
Understood.
I think it's a fascinating book from that perspective. I love it.
The theme of the show, where is the consumer attention? Obviously MasterCard clearly sits on enormous amounts of data, which gives it advantages over many other companies in the world. So you may have an interesting perspective on this. Just from your perspective, when you hear that question, how does it filter in your mind, and where do you go with that answer?
So two things. One is in terms of where their mind is, and second is where their behavior is manifested. So we measure the behavior through something called a spending pulse. We see the transactions of how people are spending on different categories. And we also do tracking more in terms of the psychology of consumers. So I'll ignore the most obvious one, like elections. Everyone is preoccupied with elections, at least in the US right now. But the things which are fascinating to me of what people are really preoccupied with is redefining their entire lives, recrafting and redesigning their lives, because everything has been put topsy-turvy. The kids are staying at home, there is no school, you can't go to office, and you are having social distance, you cannot meet friends, and you're getting obsessed and literally addicted to various digital devices. They are completely re-examining this big time in their own way, consciously, subconsciously, whatever.
That's right.
Second, and heightened focus on well-being. It's not just health as in physical health and mental health, but overall well-being, which includes, it's more a mental state to say, okay, financially, I'm all right, my kids are doing well, my job is secure, or whatever it is. So it's a whole package. We call it well-being in total. The third one, I would say, is an amazing jump in adoption of pets.
Yes.
It's extraordinary how much of movement we see in that. Entertainment, very obvious, because you don't have anything else to do. You are looking at entertainment, streaming, and all that good stuff. Fortunately for us, shopping is still continuing very strong. And you'll be surprised to see that the shopping levels, other than travel, have already crossed the pre-COVID levels last year.
Yeah,
So, which is really,
there's an enormous amount of money spent on travel and then restaurant and alcohol on premise. And so those dollars, and with stimulus checks and with Wall Street not feeling the effects, outside of pockets of Main Street, people have more money and need to spend it. Now, what I'm worried about is what happens when the other shoe fits, when we get back to real life, because there's some real ramifications.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's where the big thing is. It does look like, even if the recession is going to continue for a while, consumer confidence has not gone down in terms of the ability to spend on things that they think are essential today, whether it is home improvement or food or online. Those things are not going to really drop. And in the mass affluent and in the affluent segments, the luxury spending is actually coming right back up. So the indulgence is all there, depending on the segment that you're talking at, the geography that you're talking about. Like Kavita was mentioning before, there's a heightened awareness and concern for safety and security, which is occupying people. It's not just cybersecurity, but also an anticipation of social unrest.
Raja, I apologize for interrupting, because I want to get this question in as it came across and I'm reading comments. Do credit card companies have a vulnerability with youth behavior around apps and blockchain and things of that nature, or have in the macro, is the industry positioned well? It seems to be a very interesting debate around that. Just curious from your perspective.
Yeah. So in fact, if you look at blockchains and areas like that, they are more a form of a transaction or an enablement of transaction. So for example, you might be surprised that if you look at the top 5 patent filing companies on blockchains, Mastercard will be one of those, right? So we actually embrace and try to use the new technologies and new enablements to keep driving and enabling consumers to be able to spend in a convenient, safe, secure manner. So it doesn't adversely impact us. And if at all anything, if they are spending more time on apps and making in-app purchases, online purchases, etc.,
it's increasing.
That's only better for us, right?
What about relevance for the youth? Like, how do you self-assess your company? Like, how relevant is Mastercard, the brand, to, let's say, 15 to 25 from your perspective?
So in fact, what I would say is, as a brand, we have largely been seen as an ingredient brand. It's not a direct-to-consumer end consumer brand. That's how it has been. But from that stage, we are making a very nice movement. And depending on the country, in some countries, we are seen as one of the top 5 aspirational brands for the youth. So they look at it as a cool brand. Now, for example, if you are sponsoring, we have got about 100 dance music festivals, electronic dance music festivals. We are in esports. So it's all about what they see, the context in which your brand is appearing. And then the association keeps forming. So you find in many countries, actually, Mastercard does very well for their young population particularly. They may not be eligible for by getting a credit card or a debit card or whatever be the card, but they have got the brand awareness. They got the right perceptions about the brand. And they think that it is not a staid old brand of my father or grandfather, but it's a brand which is contemporary. And part of our rebranding exercise to take away our name Mastercard from our logo, it's just a pure symbol brand that we have got. We got the Sonic brand. We are heavily into music, into movies, and into arts and culture, esports. All these things was essentially to build our equity amongst these segments, which has been pretty positive in terms of outcomes for us.
I love that. The last couple of minutes we have here, your guess / most thoughtful response to what's the biggest shift in attention in a normalized post-COVID world? There'll be a new reality of sorts. When I say that, what's your anticipation where some of the actual attention, ears and eyes of the end consumer, where will they have aggressively shifted to more that was accelerated by this 1-2 year event that will be looked back on by every person on earth today?
It's a combination of 3 things. It's a digitization of everything becoming remote, everything becoming contactless.
Very concise, my friend.
These are the 3.
I'll give you back a minute because I know you have another book to read.
Thank you very much. Great catching up.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raja. Next up, we have Lori Abou Habib, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Sonic Drive-In. A 13-year vet of Sonic, Lori joined the company as a product pipeline manager. She was named Sonic Corporation's Employee of the Year among many, many other awards. Welcome, Lori.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Lori. How have you been doing through this? I mean, I see over your right shoulder a very, very, very cute picture. So I think we have to give that a shout out first. But how have you been and how are you getting through all this?
Yeah, I've been great. I actually have had a COVID baby. So had a baby in June. It's been quite the experience, but there's certainly pros and cons of this entire experience. I think being able to spend time with family, as so many of consumers are doing, I'll take that as a win, especially with the little one at home.
I love that. So Lori, the framework of this conversation, obviously it's a blitz of 10 minutes. Where is consumer attention? What have you seen from your purview, both as a marketer on top of one of the iconic and super strong QSR companies in our country, but then maybe even as you as a well-rounded marketer, we've had the luxury of speaking in the past. I've always thought you had really good intuition. Anytime I was saying some progressive stuff, I always liked the way it landed with you, and even your own behavior. How do you hear that, and how do you think about the future?
Yeah, it's been an exciting ride, like the last few months, and I think the one thing that's really stood out to me is our country is just really embracing indulgence, and Sonic as a brand. We shied away from that in the past. It's been something that's sort of in the cornerstone of the DNA that we really didn't fully embrace. And as we did some soul searching, pre-COVID, we really landed on this idea of how important indulgence is and what a profound role I think it can really play in consumers' lives. And so we thought we'd just embrace it and kind of own who we are. And so that's certainly something that has been relevant, definitely to Sonic, but to me in my life.
Lori, is that as simple as, hey, a nice milkshake is good and like tater tots are fun sometimes? Like, let's not be so, is it literally as simple as that at some level?
I think that's certainly an aspect of it. I think right now, I 100% believe that tons of people are just eating their feelings. And so I think it's like, getting exactly what you want, but also, also having me time, having space to get out of the house, being able to spend your time exactly how you want it. So I think that there's lots of dimensions on that because there's just so many new responsibilities that are sort of layered on people right now. So there's the escapism, but I think that there's also the simplicity of, I'm gonna eat these calories and they're not gonna count because it's gonna make me feel better and it's part of my self-care, right?
What about the notion of how you're thinking about spending marketing dollars? Where is the attention of the consumer? Obviously your brand ranges in age, demos, income levels, psychographic, demographic. How are you thinking about modern day media planning? Has the evolution, I feel like we've gone through this era of, there was a whole lot of bad planning around bad TV and bad digital. And I feel something's brewing with COVID where marketers are becoming a little bit more practitioners, thus giving them better insights. Do you see that to be true? Or when you talk to other CMOs or your crew underneath you, parallel to you, around you, former teammates, what's your point of view of the state of the union of consumer marketing, and where do you see the attention of the consumer? Where are some of the opportunities, and where are some of the things that you think have been exposed because of COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say the general consensus with my peers and my team has certainly been around this idea of, flexibility and how much flexibility can we get? There's never enough, I think, at this point in time to really, to your point, make sure that you can curate your solutions based on the circumstances as they present themselves. And so obviously digital provides a ton of flexibility there. And that's certainly something that was first and foremost in our playbook, is how do we really leverage that? I think we were fortunate from a Sonic perspective to really be well positioned to kind of leverage all things digital in between, media spend certainly, but then also our own channel ecosystem, which has been just a tremendous asset through the last 9 months. So I think it's about, being able to flex. We've seen trends come across, obviously social, because we talk about that a lot, right? But, other areas like full episode player that are really kind of eroding that more traditional stance that we've seen that trend happen over time, but certainly it seems to be accelerating these days as well. So I think that brought to light a lot of those pieces that were just naturally going to happen over time and really kind of put the gas on it.
Let me throw a couple of things that are happening in contemporary marketing and get a sense of your hot take on it. What about influencer marketing, your personal or professional point of view on that?
Yeah, I think it can be super beneficial if you use it in the right way. You know, it's all about context. And so making sure that you have the right audience connective tissue, you know where your consumer is coming from, you're really clear on where that influencer stance is, and it is a really tight connection back to the idea that you're trying to get across. I think that it can work really well. I think that there's certainly instances where you can overuse it, and then it seems like, you know, any sponsorship that's out there, you're taking advantage of. So yeah, I think
what
in moderation works.
In that scenario, what is the danger in your opinion? Because there's two sides to that statement, right? It's interesting, right? If you're taking advantage of every influencer, every popping trend, one could argue that you've got a framework of contemporariness and that's what you're trying to play on. I'm curious your perspective on why that could be an issue. I think it'll help a lot of people who are watching learn.
Sure. I really, you know, I think it comes back to the idea of authenticity, you know, and I think that's something just from a macro level that is a really big deal to consumers right now. They want to know what you stand for. And if you stand for everything, then you stand for nothing. And so making sure that you really get tight on the opportunities that you're going to attach yourselves to, I think really makes a statement about who you are and where you're going and what you stand for.
Lori, on that point, do you think consumers though can consume enough of all those things from a brand to give them that? You know, I understand that thesis, and then I think a lot, this is me asking me a question and you know, this notion that if you're everything to everybody, you're sponsoring a TikTok dancer, you're sponsoring a comedian, you're sponsoring a 50, you know, I get it in theory, but do you think consumer behavior on the other side of this conversation is actualized? Because running creative to 60-year-olds on Facebook in a certain way is gonna be different than what you're gonna put on TikTok. Running that ad spend in the Carolinas may be different than what you run somewhere else. Just curious, you know, I understand it in hypothesis. In actualization, are consumers able to, in the fragmentation of the world, actually even get to a place where, I mean, ultimately, a very simple question, do you think a consumer will step back and say, oh man, Adidas is trying to be everything to everybody, or oh man, Sonic's trying to, like, because I saw 6 different things. Do you think that manifests?
You know, I think that it's a good point that it probably isn't, other than like your really super fans that would really be exposed to that sort of consumption. But I think you still have to be careful, you know, about curating the story. I think making sure that even if you are in those places in a variety of channels and showing up in different ways, that it still connects back to that continuity of who you are at the core, right? And I think if you can get distracted by jumping on trends and you know, kind of throwing your hat in every conversation, and that's where I think the danger is, that, you know, maybe it's not a matter of an individual consumer getting you know, confused by a certain message, but I do think it's erosion on kind of your overall brand positioning.
To individual humans, or you think within internally from an operational standpoint?
Well, maybe both. Certainly there's an internal risk, but I think you once you let the guardrails down, like the risk to meander is certainly higher.
During this period, for you personally as a marketer, as an observer, or within the organization, however you want to frame it, the thing that became obvious to you even more so than ever before, back to the acceleration you referred to as, this is just overpriced activity in 2020, and the thing that became most obvious to you of this kind of tactic is underpriced and I want to be doing more of in the macro. What's the up down, you know, kind of a moment, like super hot, more hot on podcasting, down on Twitter ads, super fired up about outdoor, down on radio, like, you know, who's the winner and loser through Lori's mind as a marketer and making decisions as you go forward? What got exposed and what was, maybe I was underestimating that and I'm going to be doing more of that?
Well, I will tell you, like, out of home is a pretty good example. That was an obvious one, right?
Yeah.
But I think for us, really, you know, we've been in this sort of digital migration over time on obviously big spend in terms of national TV and cable. And so I don't think it was as much as like a huge up and down for us as accelerating a migration that was kind of already in place. And for us, it's moving more towards social, but also diversifying our digital channels on making sure that we have a stronger presence on search, that our acquisition buys into our own channels are in the right places, because those are really paying off. So it was less about, taking one from one place and adding it directly to the other, and more about kind of taking that slow migration of a large spend in one place and really diversifying it up to get the biggest bang for our buck across, a variety of different channels.
Lori, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on all the amazing things at home, in real life, and continue the great marketing.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Good to see you.
Thanks, Lori. Next up, we're excited to welcome Jason Brown, Vice President of Marketing for Champ Sports and Eastbay. Jason began his career over 15 years ago, holding leadership roles at Fox Sports, NBC Sports, and PepsiCo, where he earned the Charles Professor X Xavier Collaboration Award. Jason is on a mission to inspire and empower youth culture. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, guys. How are you?
Jason's good to see you, man.
You as well, man. How are you?
I'm well. I'm really glad you're on the show, because I think you'll bring some really fun insights here. Right off the bat, let's get right into it. Where is the consumer's attention? How do you quantify that in your mind, and what's the answer?
Well, I think you heard it just now. Our mission at Foot Locker is to inspire and empower youth culture. And given that we're predominantly focused on Gen Z, I think what's transpired the past 6 to 8 months has really been exacerbated what we already know. Consumers want brands that align philosophically with their value system, and they want you to take a stand somewhere, wherever that is. And we found numerous ways to engage, and that could be the environment, that could be encouraging civic participation. There's numerous ways in which you can do that, and I think they want to see that even more than they did before, just given the volatility that we're experiencing right now. I think that would definitely be my biggest takeaway over the past 6 months during this COVID time period.
And what about from so that macro? What about in the trenches? One thing I've always liked when we've interacted is we've always talked in our quick passes and events, NBA All-Star, CS. It always feels like a contemporary conversation, which usually leads to of the moment. So for this, I think will help so many, because we have a big breadth of entrepreneurs, kids, executives, board members, Fortune 500. How important for a brand and a slew of companies that you're overseeing is TikTok right this second? Like, just right to the punchline, like thinking about your business, how important is that platform?
It's definitely important. And I would say that we definitely haven't cracked the code yet, but it's definitely one that do you
feel it? Do you feel like, when I hear you say that, I'm sorry to jump in, but do you feel like, shit, we just really need to win on this platform pretty soon, because the longer we go, somebody else is going to take that heat?
No, absolutely. And I think there's also the fine line of making sure that you're doing it the right way. I mean, you think about when people are just buying followers and just trying to sponsor anyone they could without being meaningful. And I know, just even to your previous conversation about influencers, that's something that we use throughout all social platforms. But one of the things that I try to evangelize with my team is creating partnerships with influencers, not just people to repost something so we can count impressions at the end of a recap. It has to be meaningful and has to be purposeful. So when you think about TikTok and what we're trying to accomplish there, given that TikTok is really predicated on music and dance, we're primarily focused on sports. So how do we stay true to who we are and then make that relevant to TikTok and that audience? Because I mean, when you think about athletes in the end zone when they score a touchdown, think about the handshakes that guys give when they're going into the basketball court. That's something that's relevant to TikTok. How do you take that choreography and apply it to TikTok in a meaningful way where it's still true to us, still true to sports, and relevant to that audience?
I think that is an extremely, extremely good point. Do you think, though, in broader terms, I think one thing that people do in these moments is get a little narrow when the mass of it is just underpriced attention. The biggest thing I've learned in the last 15 years in watching, from MySpaces come up to where we are right now on TikTok, is at times we overthink things. Sometimes just the sheer youth is so there that it's just a game of like micro to macro. Like, to me, 8,000x. If I buy your company tomorrow, I'm like, we're doing 18,000 things on that platform ASAP, because almost everything's working out because the underpriced nature of the ad product, the influencers on it, like the whole thing feels macro underpriced. And I do think at times, I've become educated on why companies have to think these things through, which is just politics and internal bullshit. But like the reality is the net is underpriced. Thoughts on that?
So I do agree with some of those things that you were just saying, but I think what you got to take into consideration, I'll give you a really good example.
Please.
This was the first time in history where we had to close our entire fleet of stores during COVID, right? So then depending upon what was going on in the States, certain stores were opening before others. And then obviously people also have a different level of comfort as it relates to going into a store, even though we try to follow all guidelines, make people as comfortable as possible. Snapchat, we worked with them and we were the first retail brand to take advantage of the sneaker AR augmented reality try on, right? So back to school is very different this year. This was a back to school like we've never seen. So you're right. I could take all my money and put it into TikTok and try to create all this awareness, but why not focus on my back to school bets, the priorities that we're trying to bring to life, and allow the kid who may or may not be able to go to the store, who's on Snapchat, to be able to try on a shoe virtually and purchase it. So I think those are the kind of things you got to take into consideration. You can't just chase the cool kids if that doesn't necessarily solve for what you're trying to accomplish. And with what Snapchat recently did in terms of that program and execution, I looked at that as a win.
Jason, on that note, because I couldn't agree more with that last part, and you, being at PepsiCo, and I know a lot about the way that company scores, or at least historically has, why, to your point, you basically just said, hey, we need to do the thing that the business needs. Why do all the big companies you work for score on media metrics, not business results?
It's a combination of both. Those media metrics definitely are taken into consideration, but you have to look at media in isolation in the sense of making sure that your dollars are working. I agree that it's one of those processes that could definitely get better and be a bit more integrated.
You think? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Let's educate some kids here as they're going into the industry. Like, you know, the holding company, media company is incentivized against a certain cost, and thus that inventory gets chosen. Or an internal MMM is built that justifies television spend but doesn't justify Facebook spend. Thus, nobody spends on Facebook in 2013 or 11 when it's the #1 platform on earth. I mean, there's a big disconnect. You're now in retail, thank God, so you're getting clean returns information on sales, but like CPG land is a disaster.
It's hard. It's a challenging business. It's a challenging business, especially when you think about the volume, especially on a global level. It's really hard to correlate that together. So I think I was actually reading an article about Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. I think they both took the same approach in terms of making sure that they broke down as many silos so that everyone had the same goal, right? So if I'm in the media department, I'm gonna make sure that the impressions, the engagement, the ROI as it relates to media is through the roof. And unfortunately, that might not put me in a position to where I should be as commercially minded as I should. And I think as you start to see more integration at those companies with more of that common goal, you'll see that benefit as it relates to both having a bit more parity.
I think you're very versed in the current state of humans. How about you yourself? JB's personal attention graph these days. What is winning in your world? Which show on OTT? Which artist? Which app? What have you? And give me a little storytelling on something that's evolved. Like, oh, I wasn't into podcasts before COVID. Now, because I work out in my home gym, I am. Or I used to just have Netflix, but now I have Hulu and Roku, or I downloaded TikTok and I'm about it now. Like, what's evolved, increased or decreased in your actual media consumptions?
I would say that I've definitely gotten more into audiobooks. I was always into podcasts. I guess we could laugh at this one, but when Quibi launched, I did want to see the Clippers documentary. So
yes,
I joined Quibi for a week so I could watch that one. Obviously bad timing in terms of when and where and how.
How was it?
What do you say?
How was it? I didn't see any feedback on it. How was
it? Good. That documentary was great. It was You had to obviously restart it for the 7 episodes. That was kind of annoying, but the content itself was great. But that's the biggest change as it relates to platforms. But I think one of the things I'd want to focus on is a moment. And I think one of the best moments we had, especially as me being a sports fan, sneaker fan, etc., was what we had with The Last Dance.
Of course.
I think when you take into consideration how ESPN was able to pull that off, and when you think of how appointment television viewing does not exist today in comparison to how it was in the past, unless it is live sports, I think the way that galvanized the country, even non-sports fans, was amazing and shows how powerful content and great storytelling can be.
Jason, I really appreciate your time. I wish you continued success. Thanks for being part of this show.
Thank you, man.
Take care.
Jason. Next up, we have Anna Bogger, President and CEO of Out of Home Advertising Association of America. She recently joined in September of 2019 to spearhead the transformation. Anna was named one of the 30 most powerful women in mobile advertising by Business Insider 6 years in a row, and the awards go on and on. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anna, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, Gary?
I'm well. So, let's just get right into the meat of the conversation since we have such little time. How do you process the question, where is the consumer's attention right now? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not kidding, but I actually firmly believe that the attention is outdoor, of course, out of home. I do think that, we just recently did a survey with Harris Poll looking at consumer change and behavior since the pandemic. And I do think that consumers appreciate more than ever being outside, being out of their homes, being out and about. And that survey kind of firmly showed that 70% of Americans say that they appreciate the outdoor space much more now than they did before. And that they really appreciate messages out of home and just seeing things that seem familiar to the way the world was before. So I actually think consumer attention is there. I think people have some...
Real quick, I apologize. Because I think that's interesting. So I get the idea of like backyard, go hiking, take a run on the street. Am I incorrect? This is a question. Am I incorrect in thinking that most of the billboards or the out of home advertising is predicated a little bit more around transportation infrastructure, that on the highways or the roads or the subways, the thought of going outside for sure, but those individuals that are doing those activities, what's their likelihood of coming across a billboard and then being in the framework of consumption, since they'll be on their feet, let's say, instead of in a vehicle?
Well, I mean, they may not be in the woods, even though, there's signs everywhere.
Of course.
Actually in the woods too. Anything can be a sign, right? But no, I think you're right. I think we've changed our behavior. I think most consumers are probably not traveling as far. Transit's still a category of out of home that has not as much travelers, even though the New York Transit has about 2 million people coming through it every day. So we're back to quite high levels still. But people do take the car to go shopping or to go small errands. There's signage, there's bus shelters, there's local signs, it's out of home. It's not just about roadside. It's so much more than just that. Yes.
What I'm trying to figure out based on the report you were just talking about is the connection between, hey, I want to be out more because I've been stuck in my home, and the appreciation for outdoor advertising. What's the link there, I guess?
I think that there is a link, again, just being out and about and seeing signs, not signs as the actual signage, but signs in society that things are kind of the way they were before. We saw in this survey that more than half of the consumers overall say that they notice outdoor advertising more now than they did in the past. And in urban areas, 69%, I think it was, or around 70, said that they notice it more. So I think it's a sense of familiarity and things being back to normal again. Physical ads, resonate more, I think, than digital.
Physical more than digital.
Well, not as digital within media or within content, right?
Right, but which is interesting because the industry, correct me if I'm wrong here, the digitalization of outdoor is upon us. So if there's a subtle movement that's an interesting juxtaposition for the industry. I'm sure they're trying to debate through, right?
Well, but that's a difference between digital advertising and media, right? Our signs are digital, which makes them much more nimble and in many ways more flexible, but they're still out in the physical. Outdoor is about being in a location where consumers are for a number of different reasons, using triggers, that happens in that location, whether it's current events or weather or whatever it is, to serve an ad faster, better. So digital is actually helping our medium a lot. I'm talking more about ads that are out in the spaces that consumers want to be in right now, which is not necessarily in their home.
Understood. What is the reality of the digitization of outdoor billboards? It was a tough one. Is billboard owners, are they gravitating quickly to that because of the flexibility and the targetability? Or is the old guard still holding firm and not wanting to go that route? What's kind of the state of the union, just out of my own curiosity?
I would say, first of all, out of home is about so much more than just billboards. I just want to clarify that. It's signage everywhere. It's place-based, it's billboards, it's transit, it's airport, it's all those things. Street furniture. No, I think the whole industry has pivoted to more and more digital, and the pandemic has certainly helped with that. Again, the need for more flexibility and nimbleness that advertisers, really are looking for now has speeded up that evolution in our industry. And I think that's a really positive thing. So we're moving in that direction very fast.
And what about, to your point, expanding outside of, and I appreciate you correcting me a couple of times, because I think that's where my mind defaults. The fact that it has so much breadth than just the classic billboard on the highway. Where is the most interesting innovation around consumer attention, in your opinion, of the outdoor movement? What's kind of like, if we're putting a billboard or a bus stop ad or a bench or in the subway on the shelf over here as things we've known, what is the biggest innovations that you're seeing?
Well, the area that I'm most interested in, and that's actually not something that works so well on billboards, at least not on the highway, but it's around video, right? Our medium lends itself with these really rich screens that are in very great locations where consumers sometimes are just standing waiting for things, right? Like the bus stop or walking around in the city. The fact that our medium can not just provide rich media advertising, but actually also content, right? That brands can, produce content that follows a consumer around, build really interesting stories. I think that that's the most interesting thing or one of the most interesting things that are happening in our medium right now, and an area of really high growth.
Are there real estate owners that are really innovating? Are you having people that are reaching out to you that are trying to convert their physical into advertising mediums? Are you hearing from state parks, from people that own trees? I'm trying to really take this.
Yeah, out of home is very much about real estate. That's something that I had to learn. I've just been in this job for 1 year, and it's a big, big part of the medium. It is about finding that right location, and these real estate owners, right, or advertising companies, they're specialists in finding the right location and doing something interesting with it. And if they have one, they know about it. If they don't know about it, somebody else will come and ask them for it. So there's definitely a lot of real estate owners that are interested in this. And it's a way to monetize a building that you have, and it doesn't have to be digital. I mean, another really interesting area of out of home is just utilizing wall sides, wallscapes to create really, really beautiful, murals and paintings and things like that. Anything you have that's in a good location can really be used for advertising. It's in a good way. Of course, there are kind of laws that uphold how you do it.
We can't digitize everything. On that front, you said something there that struck me. I was just generally curious because attention comes in a lot of ways, and attention for a lot of people is maybe career changes. You said you've only been there for a year. What were you doing prior, and what was the thing that kind of tipped you over and said, heck, I need to be the president and CEO of this organization?
Well, it was really, really good timing for me, actually. The job sort of was on the market and I was contacted about it. I had spent almost 10 years at the IB, building the mobile video and data operations there. And I really like building and growing things. I'm a salesperson, right? And my first 7 years at the IB was all about that. Then it became very much about protecting and safeguarding the medium and explaining why the medium had value and worth. Out of home, is a medium where you can't block, you can't skip, you really kind of, the ad is always going to be there for the consumer to see. The experience for the consumer is great. The medium had experienced really massive growth of the past 10 years. So, and that was sort of now moving into the digital world.
Is this the enemy to the medium?
No, that's the best friend of the medium. The combination of mobile out of home is incredibly strong.
But
so that
you would agree with me that I actually want to break that down because I'm very fascinated by that, because I think about people in the subway not seeing the stop ads, or even within the subway, because like there's a lot of this going on. So how does the industry quantify or think about it being the best friend? Explain that point.
Well, there's a combination, right? First of all, there's geofencing, and you can sort of tie the mobile to the ads in a very effective way. But honestly, first of all, out of home is very much about landmarks, right? So consumers will see it. What you may think of out of home may not be what I think of out of home. Like there are places that doesn't even look like an ad where consumers want to share, so it's a strong connection to social media. So the big screen will drive to the small screen, but the other way around too. And Subway is an interesting example. Static Subway ads, out of home ads, about 70% of the viewers that see them actually then go and search for that product on their phone. So it's the combination of having something in your hand when you're out and about that can make you connect to the brand.
To act on it.
Yeah. So it's very important. Then of course, there's ways of targeting and tracking and things like that comes into that as well. So no, I would really call it the best friend. And that's really where my interest sparked too, early days at the IB.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you, Anna. Our next guest is John Halverson, VP of Consumer Experience at Mondelez International. John is a force to be reckoned with, having taken on gnarly objectives at Mondelez, including media ROI, personalization at scale, and world-class digital training. Halvo was at Twitter as Global Director of Video Strategy and Ops, and we can't welcome you enough.
Ooh, you're on mute, Halvo.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you, John. John, let's get right into the meat, because you always have incredible insights. If I frame up, where is the consumer's attention? How do you take in that question, and what would you have to say about that?
I think there's two things. I think one, the consumer's got a lot more choice out of this, and I think I really liked your conversation earlier. I was listening backstage. It's not where the advertising dollars are. It's more importantly, like the punch line to that question is, I don't think advertisers are moving nimbly or fast enough necessarily responding to them. And I thought I'm from the CPG wasteland, which you described earlier. So I found that discussion to be interesting. I'm like, hey, wait a second, that's me. But but that's a huge opportunity. Just like arbitraging attention is a huge opportunity that you've capitalized off of. I think not all CPGs not having information, it does not have to be true, one. So I think smart CPGs are building those linked to retailers, and they're going to kick the shit out of the other guys. So I ultimately think that's a temporary situation. So people have choice. People are spending their time in a lot of different places. I think platforms, maybe that's just where I'm spending my time. Like I'm rediscovering Twitter in a way, even though after working there, I think I toned out for a while, but I've been really found it super helpful to get up to speed quick. I find people are spending more time in LinkedIn on that too. Same way.
Something just triggered for me. It was crazy for me that I've rediscovered wine in the last 3 years, because I was always in wine. Then I left it and I was just kind of like over it, I guess. And then I rediscovered it. It's funny to hear. Do you feel that working at Twitter in some weird way has enabled this rediscovery, because you did look at it from a different perspective, or it was always around you, and as any human, you needed to have your attention go to other places when you were. Yeah.
I think you have to shift out and then you shift back into it. And I just rediscovered what's brilliant about it. And I'd also say they've improved that a lot too. You know what I mean? I think that there's just the continual improvement of those products makes them better. Like I look at that experience today versus when I was there, and I think that's remarkably better. I think LinkedIn has gotten a lot better. I mean, if you remember when I was at Twitter, it was a chronological timeline, my friend. And that was, that was sacred ground. So I think that there's a lot of movement, it's just gotten smarter. So I find it just to be a useful tool, and maybe it's because it's what I need in this time. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to be smarter. I feel a need to be more current on these things. And I'm finding, again, LinkedIn and Twitter to be tools to help me do it.
Since you're so at the forefront and a major media executive, talk to me about podcasting and OTT. Because I'm jumping around here a lot. You know, I'd love
I
to
don't
go-
get podcasting, so I'm going to be the contrarian on this. And like
Go ahead.
you and I have talked about this, like in a lot of categories, I totally get it. I'm in food, so I struggle a little bit to get the same, like, I love how my chocolate looks on a screen. And so I love it on out-of-home boards. I love it on digital screens.
Does that mean that Mondelez doesn't do radio as well? It's all audio?
No. Like, listen, globally, Gary, I mean, like, radio is less than 1% and predominantly in Italy to sell cream cheese to senior citizens, all right? Like, that's the radio is not part of the mix. And I would just tell you, it's never paid out from an ROI perspective. And yeah, there's
is it given the chance to the conversation we had earlier with Jason, right? Because you know where I sit on this, which is what about an actual podcast isolated test sending to Kroger's and seeing if you have lift? Because I have empathy for why
we've never ground it out as tight like we have in other things. So that's totally fair. It's just when you have an abundance of opportunity elsewhere, like what causes you to go do this and what do you see as the upside? And to your point, podcasting exceeded all expectations. I think in certain categories, it's amazing. And it's always in the context of here, it's not part of my playbook. I could go to a different company. I could go to a different CPG and it'd be like the core part of my playbook. And again,
let's talk about that because I love you for that statement. I think that was as good of a statement in this show so far. Talk to me about the reverse engineering of the reality of the business. Because I think what you said there, again, I'm always thinking about this show because we have such a crazy mix of listeners from 7-year-old entrepreneurs to board members of Fortune 50 companies. I think what you just said there is amazingly universal. How much as a media exec do you think about the context of where you're distributing based on the business result? Because what you just said is like, hey, if I believe the medium worked for me, I thought that was a big point right there. Like, how granular can you get there? We're talking to the macro. How about
I think you have to be obsessed. I think you have to be obsessed. Like, you know, the number one thing I would tell you is like, you have a business strategy about how you win, and that has to go all the way down into the media choices that you make. Because if you're going to be consumer centric, look at the companies that really grow. They're just obsessed. They're obsessed about their product, and you have to be equally obsessed about your media. And ultimately, the companies that do well, like, look, why do DTCs go? Because they're obsessed. They're looking at the results every single day. They're waking up at 4 a.m. after DoubleClick updates and sends the new results, and they're updating creative. So the people who are the best are the ones who are obsessed, and you should care about it. Like I'm just like, it's what gets me up in the morning. Like, I put my feet on the floor at 5 a.m. because I'm just like, oh, I wonder what happened. You know, like, what's going on with it?
What about the cultural overlay? You know, you work with some of the biggest brands in the world. I think about Oreo and that, you know, off the top of my head, the Supreme play or Transformers, like some of the IP. Like, what about the arbitrage of culture and where the brands show up?
I think that there's a few things. One, you can never be, you know, it's interesting. Like, I think about a continuum. Like, again, you have to have a clear strategy about how you win. And from an outside perspective, like, let's talk about Nike. I think what Nike does so well, they understand how to be in culture and the context. And you build skills to be able to do that. That doesn't just happen. You don't just wake up and be good at that. You have to be listening, social listening. You have to have insights. You have to have the right creative minds. You have to have people who are on top of that. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who grow through personalization, and their way in is through targeting and pieces. And then they target the specific people, and then they try and create relevance for it. I think that ultimately you have to have a core methodology and a dominant logic, but you have to be willing to play other opportunities when you see it. And again, Oreo does a lot of really great personalized marketing that's on this side, but then they have these pops, like things like what we did with most recently around LGBT, Game of Thrones, Tweets in the Dark, that ultimately just create relevance for the brand that enable all of this other stuff to work a lot harder. And so you have to have a dominant logic and a strategy. It's people who don't have a strategy, though. Like, look where I struggle with a lot of CPG, they play it down the middle. One day they decide to be in culture. The next day they think they want to be the greatest at personalization. The next day they want to do this. Like, you have to have a strategy and a methodology, because it'll determine the people you recruit. It'll determine the capabilities you build, the agencies you hire. You know, like, why are you running an agency? Because you're good at this. Like,
how hard is it to get a big organization? Like, you know, it's when I hear you talk, I'm like, it's really easy when I start small companies, Vayner, Empathy. Like, you know, what about at the scale that you're playing globally? What does it require in leadership to go to a totally different place, to take bets on where attention has emerged? You know, when I know enough about your career, for big company stuff, you've been able to be to places pretty damn early. It's one thing when I've been to places early, I don't have the the handcuffs. You've had a great track record of being to places much earlier than the other things that are of your size. And I think you've been able to navigate, and that's why you've had the successful career. What does it take to get big companies to those new places before reporting has kicked in and common sense is the currency? Or is that even the play?
No, I mean, it's very much the play. I mean, I think that ultimately what it takes to do that is, one, you have to get in and you have to make a strategic assessment of the situation. So you just got to look around and say, look, how do we win, right? And think about different companies you've run. Like, even if you're an entrepreneur or startup, are we going to be high margin and sell a few, or are we going to be low margin and sell a whole lot, right? Like, there's a dominant logic as to how you win. So then you have to, just like in media, you have to make an assessment and say, okay, what are we? Like, what type of company are we? What are our core competencies? What's our philosophy for how our brands grow? And ultimately, you have to put those statements down and have a manifesto and know what you don't believe. You know what I mean? Like, with us, we believe mass communication is done. We think it's a single digit thing. The dominant logic of CPG, of mass communications, when I got here in 2017, we said, we think that's a low single digit growth opportunity. Not all that interested. We'll be a part of the mix, yeah, but it's not the focus. It's not where we're going to invest. We're throwing out ubiquity auditing. We don't really care how we do this. We don't care how we do this because that's part of that world. Then what you have to have a narrative. Like, ultimately, you have to have a thesis that you can take to people that stirs their hearts and their minds. And that, because once you scale that across the organization, then people will know what you're doing, because you cannot be everywhere. Like, you, Gary, can't be everywhere in your company, but yet people know, like, hey, here are the principles.
100%.
These are the guidelines. And I think what's important about that, I had a real revelation on this week, is the reason why guidelines are important and boundaries is because if you give people boundaries, they will run to them. Whereas if you don't, they will stay safe in the center. They're ultimately not going anywhere. And so when you say, look, this is your decision rights, they will sprint out to fill that whole space.
They're crippled by too much open because it becomes fear-based.
There's no psychological safety. It's like, call the ball.
John, I could do this for 40 hours, but since this was 10 minutes, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for that explosion of energy.
All right, we will.
Thank you, Halvo. Next, we want to welcome Bob Pittman. He's the CEO and chairman of iHeartRadio, the #1 audio company in America. Bob was the co-founder and programmer behind All Things MTV, and he's the co-founder and original lead investor in Casa Dragones Tequila.
The good stuff.
I love that was in there. Bob, it's great to see you.
Good seeing you. Thank you, sir.
Speaking about consumer attention, I do think the iconic nature, I want to speak about the audio stuff in a big way, but I do think between iHeart, between playing such a major role in the current state of podcasting, but also being at the forefront of MTV, what's the similarity in what you learned in the mid 80s there in building that dominant force of attention and sitting at one of the seats at the precipice of the current attention graph around audio? Any common themes that can link that can be pattern recognition for the audience?
Sure. I think what you're doing is you're looking at what do people need, what's been overlooked. MTV was really about, you had a generation that had grown up with TV and grown up with music, and the two had never come together, rock music. Right. So we put them together, and what we figured out was that we were never going to make music fit the TV form, so we made TV fit the music form. And we made MTV the star, not the pieces of it. We weren't a delivery system like a broadcast network. And what we became was we came in the heart of the culture. And what we figured out is, how do we get people talking about us? How do we become part of the culture? By the way, I did it again at AOL with Steve Case. When we did AOL was, in my day in the 90s, we had 50% of the traffic of the internet in the US went through AOL. And we were AOL Instant Messenger. We were sort of the Facebook and Google combined of that period. And indeed, my last deal was to give Google the search traffic of AOL, which gave them their critical mass. And I think iHeart's been the same thing. I mean, what we spotted was that, and I was interesting listening to your previous guest and talking about radio. I'm not sure he grasped what it is, what radio really is, and what audio and what podcasting is. I mean, it's a consumer idea. Every time I do something, I was at AOL, I said it's convenience in a box. What we're doing is we're making everybody's life easier by using this thing called the internet to save them time. With with iHeart, what we're doing is we realize people are desperate for companionship, especially in this world in which we're all taking our phones and staring at them like this on the street. Is we are looking for somebody to keep us company. And by the way, Ryan Seacrest is a great friend to so many people in the morning. They listen to him when they're in the shower. He's entertaining them and talking to them while they're brushing their teeth. They rides to work with them. And that's the way. And by the way, the Charlamagne the God, Elvis Duran, Bobby Bones, pick yours. And to me, that's the big idea and why I got so interested in it. And I think radio was sort of lost in, oh, but it's AM, FM. It's not. It's wherever the listeners are with the products and services they expect. We're on smart TVs, smart speakers. We're on 250 other platforms. And to me, podcasting is the equivalent of what Netflix was for TV. It's sort of radio on demand, or things that could have been on the radio. And that's sort of all it is. And it's no surprise, probably, that NPR and iHeart are the two big podcasters by about 2x to the next largest. And we have this sort of flywheel going that people hear about stuff on the radio, they check it out on podcasting, we cycle them through in and out.
You know what's so crazy about this combo? The written word, pictures, video, and audio communication will be here in perpetuity, in different shapes and formats, in different distributions. And by the way, and we've seen this, you know, the 1940s and 50s, boxing, horse racing, baseball, radio was dominant. Then the video creation came. Then the internet came. It all evolves, and they'll all have their moments, right?
Well, by the way, what's interesting is, if you look at the consumer, radio's never left. It reaches about 92% of Americans.
None of it's left.
Forever. So all you're talking about is fads and advertising, not with the consumer.
But I will say this, Bob. I agree with all that, I do think when the mobile device comes along and creates radio in your pocket, I do think there are subtle moments of distribution. I do think, as you know, when you look at the evolution, the distribution of video with a laptop that I have right now accelerate. I do think things distribute differently.
Well, by the way, we had a transistor radio in the 1960s. You're too young, you weren't there. It looked a lot like this.
I was a Walkman guy.
It was a little thicker. No, the transistor radio was a lot thicker, but it was about that size, and it opened up mobility. And so I think what you find is, at the end of the day, look, I've sold people a lot of stuff, and I've created some big brands. I've turned around Six Flags theme parks, Century 21 real estate, Casa Dragones tequila. You know, I love doing this, but what always is important is we need word of mouth. We need people talking about us, not showing it. When we say, I want my MTV, people don't come and say, let me show you a picture of MTV. They tell their friend, have you heard about MTV? It's great. They're using words. They're using a conversation. If you want culture, it's 100% about somebody telling you something. I know we've arrived when we're the topic of a dinner table conversation. And if we're not, I haven't arrived. And what I often use advertising for, like I want my MTV, I needed to prime the pump of word of mouth. I got to get people talking about me. What can I do? And that's the holy grail, I think, in making something big.
Biggest buyer of what you just said, when you think about distribution, getting that message in the right places, and when you think about the content, the thing that fills that pipe, when you go for that being talked about at the dinner table, in the distribution of the moment and the content that fills it, how do you see the 100% energy of getting that right? Which takes the lead? Is it even Steven? When you personally think about where you're distributing the message and what the message is to get to the dinner table, how do you break down 100%? I'm just genuinely curious.
For us, it's easy. There are 1 billion radios in America. What are there, 250 million smartphones, 120 million, 150 million computers? We have a device advantage. Now, not resting on our laurels, we also said, you know what? There are times when people don't have that. You pointed it out. Here it is. So I want to be everywhere, and our strategy is be everywhere our listeners are with the products and services they expect. And so we've done some research. When you talk to young people, we had this, one of these stories you tell again and again. A couple of years ago, we were doing one of these focus groups and talking to young people and talking about radio, and they kept looking like this. And I said, what's going on? You're giving us a weird look. And finally they go, why are you calling it radio? And that's just the device. That's a thing. And I said, what would you call it? They said, well, I call it Z100. Or I call it Elvis Duran. And I guess you're right. And it's sort of that moment, sort of like, aha, freed us from the fact that the consumer is agnostic on devices. By the way, they think this is a radio somehow in here. They don't understand it's using the internet, blah, 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 blah. It's just like turn it on, I can see 100 there and get it on my smart speaker.
It's audio to them.
Yeah, Alexa, play C100 for me. It works. And so and then when you talk about content, we're the most unusual medium you can think of, because our content is actually not linear. It's not story arc. It's not the normal kind. It is companionship. I'm another human being who will keep you company. By the way, how valuable is that? Very valuable. By the way, during COVID, we saw it was even more important. By the way, come after a tornado, after a hurricane, everybody's on the radio, and we're not doing music programming. We're telling people where to get blankets. In Houston, when there was flooding, we were on the air and people were calling us on the phone, telling us where they were, and we were telling people with boats how to get to them to rescue them.
Bob, I have a huge question. I apologize. I have a huge question because we have 1 minute.
Sure.
The only thing I've been thinking these whole 9 minutes, even though you've been dropping fundamental gems on content and distribution and attention graph, is how the fuck does this guy not have his own radio show? His voice was fucking built for fucking podcasting. Bob,
by the way,
your voice, you are literally the voice.
Listen to Math and Magic, Stories from the Frontiers of Marketing. I do my own podcast. It's about marketing. You will love it. And you've now agreed, you don't know it, to come on and be a guest.
It's done, brother. It's great to see you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bob.
Andrea, real quick, I know you need to read the thing, but like Bob's voice is insane.
I know, isn't it crazy?
I was like listening. I'm like, wait a minute, this is a tremendous voice.
It's so funny. That's what all the comments are saying too.
I love it.
They want you, Bob.
I love it. I love it. I was a DJ as a teenager, so
clearly,
there you go.
Sounds like it. Go ahead, Andrea.
All right. Next up, we've got a different kind of DJ in Alicia Tillman, the global CMO of SAP, who is the boss. Alicia was named the 11th most influential CMO. I want to meet the other 10. Who could they possibly be? And most importantly, she is a Jersey girl through and through. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks, Andrea. Hey, Gary.
Hey, Alicia. It's so nice to see you.
You too.
Talk to me about, we're going to go right into the meat because you always have such great insights. Consumer attention. You know, with SAP being such an iconic B2B business, I'm actually going to start there because I'm trying to fill a lot of different voids, help a lot of people who are listening, go a lot of different places. From a B2B standpoint, trying to, you know, it's very different than trying to get somebody to download the iHeart app and listen to some music or to sell some Oreos. You're selling sometimes 7, 8-figure contracts. How do you think about, and by the way, what I know about the B2B world is a lot of conferences, a lot of big booths at B2B, a lot of sales DNA more than marketing and branding DNA. Where do you see the attention of the B2B decision maker, your potential customer? For all the B2B heads that are in here, how are you thinking about current attention graphs and where their attention is?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple. And, you know, I'll say I don't think it's much different from how we need to market to consumers, especially in the environment we're in right now. At the end of the day, it's about the story you tell. I could be selling box cereal to enterprise software to how to get attention on MTV. It is about the story, the relevance, the emotion, how well it connects. That's what it's all about. And if you don't have a narrative and you don't have a brand that's anchored in purpose and things people care about, you need to believe that if I'm a CFO or a CMO or a CIO or whatever C-level at an organization, more and more people are buying with their hearts, their values, even if it's meaning they're buying technology to service a part of their business. They're not going to buy technology from a company that doesn't share in their values and isn't contributing to help make the world a better place. It's what it's all about. It's about value, relevancy, and purpose.
And what about where you're distributing those messages and in what content? I think the thing that I'm thinking a lot about is I couldn't agree with that more. So now what's the manifestation from a production standpoint, and which channels, so much of this is the contemporary 2021, as we head into 2021, what are the channels that you think are emerging as better deals for your money? And what are some of the ones that you and your partner are starting to look around and be like, do we really want to write $1 million check for X, Y, and Z?
So it's all about community, and how do you create forums that allow people to be part of the discussion? I mean, look at this community that we're in right now. You and I are having a conversation, and you see the chat where others are participating in the conversation as well. And that's what it's about. It's how do I get access to you? How do I become part of the conversation? How can I tell you the value that I need so that you can actually shape a product for me? So I not only come in and buy it, but that I come back time and time again because I know that you're listening to me. And so video, chat, any type of interactive media where your buyers can feel as though they have that access to you to be able to shape the way you're thinking in terms of the innovation around the products and services that you create. That's where I think the future is headed. Static communications, sure, it can tell a story, but people don't get a chance to react to that live. And there's too many opportunities today otherwise that will allow for that. And that's what people want. They want to be part of it. They want to shape it. And I think that that's what's going to be the most meaningful as we head into the future.
You're sitting as a CMO of one of the biggest companies in the world, trying to, again, bring this program to all my different constituents. There's a lot of young women trying to get into marketing right now that are probably listening. How should they be thinking about how did they get to your spot? Like what are the things that you learned, the do's, the don'ts? There's so much serendipity. I know there's a lot of things that go into it, but if you're really trying to mentor some of the young men and women who are listening right now about to get to this level of marketing, how do you think about that?
I would say that I'd focus on the things that don't typically appear on a resume. In fact, I actually think the entire resume needs to be rewritten because yes, it's important that you have experience in what you've delivered. But I think what's even more experience, certainly at my level, is how well of a communicator are you? How much empathy do you have? How much do you value a diverse and inclusive workplace? How much care and attention do you give to employees when they need it most, especially during a global pandemic when mental health and wellness is at an all-time low? Those are the things that really matter when it comes to operating at the top of your company, the top of the function in which you lead. When you think about developing something new, being an entrepreneur, those are the things that set you apart. I had a conversation this morning with someone that I'm mentoring, and, she said to me, I don't really have the experience and I don't know how I'm going to get it. And I said, you know what I want you to focus on is that energy you're bringing to me right now. Do not lose that passion, that energy, this belief that you can change things, because we don't have enough of that. We have a lot of things.
I apologize. Why do you think people fear?
Because I think there's a lot of things in life that have failed people. And I think people
I apologize. Do you think that the way school is structured in society, that you have to play within these rules to get this achievement? I've been thinking so much about this because you're touching on something I care a lot about. And I'm like, why are you doing this? And somebody said to me, well, it's all I know. Do well for 90 days, get a report card. Do well for do you think that the rigidness of education has led to a lot of this fear in corporate?
I've always thought that, you need a certain level of education and then you need to go out in the real world and then you need to actually go back to education again.
Do you think you and I grew up in an era where education was overvalued because the real life stuff wasn't as big of a conversation?
Yes.
I do too.
Yes. They don't teach you the soft skills that are necessary. There's not enough interaction that helps form your social skills, your leadership skills. Sure, they teach you the fundamentals of how to lead a marketing program, and those things are necessary, but does it teach you how to be an empathetic person?
And Alicia, what about the fact that a lot of the teachings on how to build a brand or things of that nature were in a television top-down world as the internet's staring us in the face? I mean, even that teaching, I mean, I'm devastated when I talk to some kids coming out of like real brand school. I'm like, this is what they're teaching?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. There are differences on so many levels, and you've got to think about when and where you apply the right tactics to the right things based on what matters to that point in time or that person that you're talking to. And so it is so nuanced, it is so varied, and you have to have the empathy, the ability to listen, to then go out and sort of react to what it is you need to bring to what people want. And how well do you absorb that and shape something in response is, in my view, what's going to set the great leaders apart from those that are not seen as the best leaders of their time.
Alicia, you have to tell me a huge secret. I've been doing this show for months. We've rebooted it. I like this format. By the way, as we're wrapping up, please everybody leave. I see all the comments. How do you like this 10-minute rapid format versus the other one? Please leave that comment. But I have a massive question. You have the best lighting that I've seen from any guest on this show. And I think a lot of people, D-Rock's laughing in the back. But what is that? You must, am I right? I mean, your lighting's insane, Alicia.
Thank you. No, thank you. I have a beautiful light right in front of me that helps. Like, we need good lighting. Goldie Hawn told me a year ago when I met her that the secret to life is good lighting.
By the way.
And it's true.
By the way, it's, you know what just made me like smile in my heart? For you and I and Andrea and a certain percentage of this audience, that Goldie Hawn reference was such a huge flex, humble brag. For a whole other portion of our audience, they're like, who? Anyway, Alicia, thank you so much. Continued success. We love sharing. What a lot of people don't know is VaynerMedia and SAP are in the same building in Manhattan. So we love sharing the building with you. Continued success.
And I love sitting with an award winner here, by the way. Congratulations, Agency of the Year. You guys completely deserve that. And keep rocking it because you guys deserve it.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Well, Gary, I like this format. What'd you think?
I think that.
Should we do it again?
We will definitely do it again.
Let's talk about it. I'm going to talk to your audience about it. I think I need you to, I have a little,
leaving?
I have to tell your audience. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. You want me to leave?
Yeah, I'm going to need you to leave for a second. I have a couple questions I need to just ask them without you here.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you later. Please leave.
Bye, Gary.
But hold on, Andrew. Let me just say goodbye. I mean, I'm not. Do you know what they're doing? Thanks everybody for watching this week. Please leave some comments on Twitter right now. I'm going to go there while I go to my next meeting to just get a sense of the format. I was following along. 10 minutes. I know I'm trying to get to some places. So like classic, I had to interrupt here and there, but I didn't want to. But I thought we got a lot out of this. I like the single format theme questions. Please give me some feedback on that. Andrea, have fun with whatever the heck you're up to. We'll talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Gary. All right, everybody. Shh. We're going to have a surprise birthday party for Gary Vaynerchuk. And it's going to be on November 19th, Thursday, November 19th, from 12 to 2 p.m. So I'm hoping you can all join me to send some birthday wishes and all the rest. And if you'd like to get an invitation, get everything put on your calendar, get some of our marketing newsletters, please fill out our form. It's on all things social everywhere that we are. So go fill out one of those forms and we'll get you all the information. Keep the conversation alive at #marketingforthenow. Let us know what you thought about this format, and we will see you on November 19th. Bye-bye.